Hey there, my name is Brashler, and in this video, I want to teach you about the PSE from Waves, or the Primary Source Expander. Now, this is, in essence, a gate, but it's an expander that is one of my favorite plugins to use on vocals, and there's a whole lot of reasons why, but it's a very simple plugin to use. There's just a few controls for it, and it just sounds great. Now you can definitely overdo it with an expander or a gate, but if you set it up correctly, it'll sound fantastic. So let's go ahead and dive in and see actually how we use this. So first off, I'm just going to go ahead and remove these from both of these vocals. So I have these two vocals from a live performance. Now let's go ahead and hear what this kind of sounds like here.
They thought it was finished when they nailed you to that tree. Your mother cried as they mocked you at the place called Calvary. And they thought it was over when they laid your body down. Guarded by Roman soldiers, you spent 3 days in the ground. But then you rose up like a lion, you beat the grave.
Now, with these vocals, I have them pretty unprocessed. I only have one CLA 76 on there. I'm not doing any subgroup compression. I'm not doing anything like that for the vocals. So that's why I'm really pushing these pretty loud. I'm trying to give you the most unprocessed sound of these vocals as I can to show you about this. Now, if we do listen in on this, I do want to actually pull this up and insert and uninsert the F2 on both of these channels. It's actually pretty crazy how much low end is coming through this. So if I go and uninsert and mute the band, that is a lot of low end coming through those mics. And here's with them in. So I'm just I'm doing a low cut at 137. It's a good amount of low end that's there when you have this uninserted. But what I notice about this section is that there is a lot of drum sound that's coming through the vocal mics. And when you're pushing the vocal mics in a live mix really hot, that sound of those drums and those overheads and everything comes through those mics, obviously. And so where the PSE can come in is it can remove some of the areas where they're not singing and duck that down, or reduce the volume, and that way you can have a quieter lead vocal when they're not singing. And that way, when the band is in, the band sounds a lot more tight. Now, the issue with drum bleed through vocal mics is, one, any EQ that you're doing on that vocal mic, you're also doing on the bleed that's coming through. So if you boost the high end or boost 10K to add some like air to a vocal or something like that, you're doing that same thing to the bleed that's on that microphone. And so that's why we want to try and use gates or the PSE in this instance to try and reduce some of that bleed for that vocal mic. So I'm going to just play this same section here, and let's listen to it with the band real fast.
They thought it was finished when they nailed you to that tree. Your mother cried as they mocked you.
Okay, and so if I mute the band here.
They thought it was finished when they nailed you to that tree. Your mother cried
and so
as
a perfect example is if I mute my vocal 6 and listen to my vocal 1 here, he is not singing. But all that noise is coming through on the mix. And so then when he does start singing, obviously we need to hear that. So that's the tricky part of placing a gate or an expander on a channel, is you want to make sure that your threshold is set so that when they do start singing, it comes through. And so let's go ahead and actually insert a PSE here. So I'm going to pull up a PSE. I'm going to start off with my vocal 1 here. So it's going to be in dynamics, and then we go find our PSE, which is going to be right here. And so once we have our PSE, we can open it up, and there is a few different settings on this that we can go ahead and set. First is our threshold. Obviously, this is where we want to place our gate, in essence, this PSE, to start reducing volume. So what we want to do is we want to place the threshold high enough to get over that background noise of the drums, but not too high in where we mute the vocal when they're singing. And so that's the key portion of the threshold. Our range is going to be how much for our PSE do we want to reduce that background noise. So let's go ahead and set just these two settings real fast. So I'm going to start with -15 here, and we're just going to adjust this up until we start getting some reduction.
They thought it was over.
And so we're noticing that there's still some reduction here, but every time that kick drum hits, it's still unmuting this expander. So the next thing that we could do is we could add in some sidechain settings. So the sidechain settings allow us to add a high pass and a low pass filter to really focus in on one area of this vocal for the PSE to be listening to. And so to do this, what we want to do is we want to go ahead and turn this on. And then at this point, we can go ahead and set our high pass and low pass filters. Now, let's go ahead and listen to this. And so the high pass is obviously going to be reducing the low end. And the low pass is going to be reducing the high end that's coming through on this sidechain circuit. So in this case, I'm wanting to make sure that when the drummer hits those cymbals, it's not going to be coming through this PSE. And so that's why I'm trying to set this low pass filter. Now, if, for instance, the singer came in and only was saying S's and didn't have any other frequency range other than above 4K, then the gate of this PSE wouldn't really be opening as well because we are cutting out some of that high end. But the human voice doesn't really work that way, so that's good. So with the vocal, I'm going to be putting both the low cut and the high cut in so that we're really focusing in on the mid range, which really comes through when the vocalist starts singing here. And so we can listen, we can hear him just fine. And so let's go ahead and try listening to this and see how this is coming through first. So that kick drum is still coming through. So one thing that we could do is we could adjust our threshold higher. Now if we did that, then the downside is that some of those words are still getting cut off, as we can notice. So that's the downside of using a gate, is if we need to get that threshold up super loud and reduce that background noise a lot, we can cut off some of the words of that singer, which is not a great idea. So the other thing that the PSE has is this secret little thing, and it's this gain section right down here. Now, this applies a little bit of background noise into the sidechain circuit. Now, the sidechain circuit is what this PSE is actually listening to for reducing the noise of this vocal. Now, if we go back to this section and I lower this threshold back down to about right here, what we can do is we can start adding in this gain to the point where the kick drum doesn't open this gate. Well, now notice that this range is not being affected at 34. But when this was down here, we'll notice that it was being affected. So let's go back up to 34. Okay, and let's see if our words are still being cut off when he comes in a little bit later.
They thought it was over when they laid your body down.
That feels pretty good. Now, the next thing that we have is our release. So the release is how quickly is this going to gate down or take that range down. The attack of a gate is how quickly it's going to open up. Notice there is no attack settings. There is only the release setting. So the main difference on this is once we get to a portion of the song where he's singing, we can set this to a slow release, which will mean that the gate will take a little bit longer to close down.
They thought it was over when they laid your body
versus fast,
down.
where it's very, very fast to close down.
But then you rose up like a lion.
Now he's starting to sing. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in the other vocalist with the same PSE. And so I'm just going to copy over the settings here. So I'm going to go to my mixer 1 here. I'm going to press and hold Alt and then just drag my PSE over to my vocal 2. Or my vocal 6 in this instance. So let's go ahead and listen in on our vocal 6 in the same section.
They thought it was finished when they nailed you to that tree. Your mother cried as they mocked you.
Pretty much
at the place called Calvary.
nailed it here.
And they thought it was over when they laid your body.
Okay, so let's go ahead and take this range a little bit lower than this, just to overemphasize this just a smidge. And so usually for a live vocal, I am sitting in the -15 to -20 range for the PSE. If I wanted to have more reduction, I can go ahead and take this all the way down to -60. But what I've noticed when I'm mixing is that when you take something that low, it ends up making it sound a little fake, which we don't want to do. We don't want a fake sounding mix. So I go ahead and set this about -20 to just give a little bit of reduction, but not a ton of reduction. Also, the other benefit is if they do sing slightly under that threshold, then it's still going to come through if your range is set at -20, -12, that sort of thing. If it's set at -40, then you're not going to hear that background singing of that singer if they're just slightly underneath the threshold point. So let's go ahead and listen to this, and I'm just going to take these out real fast, and then we can put them back in.
They thought it was finished when they nailed you to that tree. Your mother cried as they mocked you at the place called Calvary. And they thought it was over.
Okay, let me put them back in, and we can listen to that same section.
They thought it was finished when they nailed you to that tree. Your mother cried as they mocked you at the place called Calvary.
It's a pretty big difference.
And they thought it
especially
was
if we add
over
in the rest of
when
the
they
band.
They thought it was finished when they nailed you to that tree. Your mother cried as they mocked you at the place called Calvary.
So let's go ahead and listen to this without these here. So uninsert those.
They thought it was finished when they nailed you to that tree. Your mother cried as they mocked you at the place called
Uninserted.
Calvary. And they thought it was over. They thought it was finished
And here it is
when they
inserted.
nailed you to that tree. Your mother cried as they mocked you at the place called Calvary.
Here's without.
And they thought it was.
It's hard to notice. It is definitely there. But what you can hear is a lot less of the mid-high range around like the 3 to 5K. I noticed that there's a little bit of just background verb almost that comes through without the PSEs engaged. And then once we insert those PSEs, all of that just kind of goes away and makes it so that the kick drum just sounds a little bit more tight in that area. Again, with audio, we're trying to go for subtle on this one. I'm not trying to do these massive EQ and gating things on this vocal. I'm just trying to do subtle things to it. So here it is without. Again.
They thought it was finished when they nailed you to that tree.
And here it is
Your
with.
mother cried as they mocked you at the place called Calvary. They thought it was over when they laid your body down. God guarded by Roman soldiers.
And so that's the beauty of the PSE, is we can make the sound very, very natural and have a very good amount of processing done on this vocal where we need it to. Now, of course, if I needed to reduce this even more, we could go to our range, and I can go ahead and slam this thing down to -40. And again, that's going to reduce that background noise by -40, which would make a huge difference on this vocal. Now, when you have, say, 8 vocalists out on stage, and not all of them are singing at the same time, that's where the PSE really, really shines, is when we have those 8 vocal mics and they're all unmuted, they're all getting that stage noise. And so when you have just 1 or 2 channels of a vocal, it's not that big of a deal to have a little bit of stage bleed. But once you have 8 vocalists and maybe 1 or 2 of them are leading, then that's when that stage bleed really comes into play. And that's where the PSE really, really shines. So again, the PSE is fantastic. You have a threshold, you have a range, you have some sidechain adjustment for your high pass and low pass. You also have that background noise adjustment right here on this gain. And remember, you can use those for your benefit. Again, I added in a little bit of background noise in that sidechain so I could come above the sound of that kick drum hitting, which is super, super helpful. And then we also have our release time, slow, medium, and fast. The other place that I would use a PSE is on a lav, or a DPA headset, or a handheld for speech. Now, with speech, I'm definitely not going to be reducing by 40 dB. I'm going to be reducing by 6 to maybe 12 dB, and it's just making it so that all of the sound of the AC, all the sound of people rustling papers, that sort of thing gets reduced a little bit. Again, I like going for subtle when I'm using the PSE, which is where it shines. Now, if you want to find out more about the PSE, I have a link down in the description below to Waves' site. And again, it is one of my favorite plugins to use on vocals and corporate for speech. There's a lot of different uses for this plugin. Now, I hope this video was helpful for you today. If you do happen to have any questions, or there's a video that you're hoping that I would make on any Waves plugin, or any really other production equipment that's out there, please paste that in the comments down below. I'm always reading through those comments to find videos that can be helpful for you. If you haven't already, make sure to check out my website at drewbrashler.com. Otherwise, I hope you have a great day.